Okay,
Don't want to miss any goodness.
sure. Yeah. Is that a virtual background or is that your real one?
That's totally a virtual background.
Oh.
I'm in our living room.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know how it is.
Oh, I totally understand. Yes. Yeah. Thanks for being flexible and rescheduling last time. I
Yeah,
actually don't think I ever came down with anything. I was like good because I kept doing all my neti pot and vitamin C and all that kind of
good.
stuff. But you know how that goes with your voice and it's just ugh.
Totally. I'm actually feel like I'm on the brink of something, but my voice still seems okay. So I was like, let's
Yeah.
just charge ahead. I don't want to. We
Yeah.
wait till everybody's healthy. It feels like there's like a few families we try to get together with, and it's like we almost just don't even see each other during the winter because of cold and flu season.
Yeah, somebody's always sick, right?
Yeah, I have this mug. Last week I didn't really have my routine. I traveled for work, and so it's like
Uh-huh.
I really needed to do yoga. Last night, my husband was like,
Yeah.
"You need to do yoga. Like, please stop." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm kind of cranky." I had this mug. It says, I don't know if you can see it. It says, "Do not
Do not
disturb."
disturb. I love
And,
that.
and I was like, and it was like during the kids' bedtime that I was trying to do yoga. And I was like, this mug feels like aspirational.
100%.
You know what I mean? Oh my
Yeah.
God.
How old are your kids?
Mm. Yes, great question. They're 3 and 8. And
Okay.
little guy is homesick today.
Mm.
So he may make an appearance.
Yeah, that's
So
how it
we'll see.
works. I
Yeah,
know I
that's
wasn't sure this morning. Of course, we had like some snow and ice overnight. I mean, not much, but it's one of those things where they did have a 2 hour delay, and I was like, you guys need to get on the bus. You need to get to school. You
I have
know,
things to do.
That's stuff to do. Like, let's
I
go. But it
know.
worked out because my one son, he does Lego robotics and like
Mhm.
they had a competition this past weekend. They were like really hoping to move on to the next round. But it was aspirational thinking, just like your mug. Um but it was like all weekend. So last night he was like,
Uh,
"Mom, I don't want to go to school. Like, can we just go in late?" And the
oh,
universe
very
listened to him and he got to go in late anyway, so it worked out.
How old are your kids? Did you remind me?
Yeah, 8 and 11.
Okay. Okay. So you're like kind of starting to get into that next stage, the preteen.
Yes, like middle school for my
Oh
older one.
boy. A whole
Yes,
new set of parenting challenges.
yes, yes. But he's not the one I worry about. It's the younger one that'll be
Yeah.
an interesting.
Okay. Is the younger one a girl or a boy?
Both boys.
Okay. Okay.
So it's just they have very different personalities. My older one is a
Uh-huh.
very typical older, like follows the rules, like make sure
Yeah.
everybody else follows the rules, like he's on time, he's prepared.
The younger one's like, eh.
It's like, what rules? Like, what do I need to do? But he has a lot more, I feel like he has a lot more fun because like the
Yeah,
world
yeah,
just
sure.
like,
And
yeah,
the
we had
person who
me.
doesn't follow the rules is always a lot more fun to hang with.
Exactly. Yeah,
Oh my
100%.
God.
But yeah.
Okay, well, let's get into it, Becky.
All right. Sounds
I
good.
do have a hard stop at the
Okay.
hour.
Yep.
I think that'll be more than enough time.
Oh, yeah, we'll have plenty of time.
So, how do you say your last name?
Whoa, chick.
Wojcik. Ooh,
Yeah.
okay.
It's
Yeah,
Polish. If you were in Poland, it'd be like the W is a V. So it's like Wojcik.
okay.
So, but
Well, I'm so
whoa.
happy to have you here. I have Becky Wojcik, and you have all these wonderful letters after your name.
Oh,
MARDN, LDN. Can you tell me what all those mean?
sure. Yeah. So I have a master's of arts in nutrition education. So that's my master's degree.
Hmm.
That was in conjunction with an internship that I did at Immaculata University to be a registered dietitian nutritionist, which is the next
Okay.
one. That's an RDN. And then in
Okay.
the state of Pennsylvania, where I live, I'm also licensed as a dietitian
Okay.
nutritionist. And then I also am a registered yoga teacher too. That would be
Oh, so
also
you
behind my
left one
name.
of them off. So what's
Yeah.
the difference between being registered and licensed? So you get a
So
license nationally and then you get registered in the state?
it's the opposite, actually.
Oh,
It's
okay.
registration nationally, and then licensure is each state.
Do you need your master's in order to do that, or is it like a separate thing?
It used to be where you didn't need your master's, and in 2024, they just changed the requirement. For
Okay.
new students, they do require you to have your master's in order to be registered. So they've
Fun facts. Okay, cool.
yeah.
So we sorted that out. I'm so happy to have you here. So a little bit of background. Becky and I met through a former colleague of mine who does her name's Allie or Allison Songstad, and she does the voiceover intro for my podcast. So
Oh,
you'll
great.
get to hear that as well, Becky. The podcast, as of today, is not yet released. It's going to come out any day now. And so Allie and I reconnected. We've kind of stayed in touch since we both left our prior company, and I knew she sang opera before and she's starting her voiceover career on the side. And I was like, hey, do you want to record my podcast intro? And it was like such a lovely excuse to get back in touch with her. And then I was telling her about the podcast. Of course, she wanted to know about it. And it's like, yeah, I just like really want to connect with people in particular in the wellness space, but not exclusively because the podcast is really focused on working professionals who are burn the F out, right? And they need a lifeline to grab onto, and it's a little overwhelming to know where to start. And so, kind of like giving people different ideas of where they can start. Primarily, I work a lot with moms, but not exclusively. And so she said, oh, you got to talk to Becky. You
I
have to talk
love
to
that.
Becky. Y'all are gonna hit it off. And we did. So
Yes.
I had a brief call with you. And as soon as I was talking to you, I was like, you have to come to my Australia retreat.
Yes,
Go
I'm
lead it.
ready.
Yeah, so that's happening in November of this year, the 10th through the 14th. So I'm excited for that. Maybe we'll have a separate episode just to talk about the retreat. But today I wanted to really dive into what you do because I have been on my own health journey, nutrition journey, a lot of self-learning, which, for better or for worse. Um, and so, yeah, I would love to hear about the company you started, Joyful Connection Nutrition and Wellness. Is that correct?
You got it.
Okay, so yeah, I would love to hear about like what inspired you to start this and how your personal journey shaped your approach to health and wellness.
Yeah. So just like many of the clients that you may serve or connect with during COVID, I'm a mom, so I have two kids, 8 and 11. They're both boys. And at the time, I've been a registered dietitian for over 20 years. But at the time, I was an internship director for a local university, for Westchester University. So I was in the
Okay.
education space.
And
And
you're in
before that,
Pennsylvania, right?
Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
outside of Philadelphia.
Okay.
And I had, before that, been in the clinical world, worked in hospitals. I had been in food service realms. I've done a lot in nutrition in general, but more serving people that were really sick rather
Mm,
than people trying to necessarily get well.
hmm.
And my own journey during COVID was I noticed that I was eating more and
Yeah.
drinking alcohol more to
So
cope
you,
with the really challenging time that we
yeah,
faced.
I mean, most people were, and I was too. They said alcohol sales just like
Oh,
completely skyrocketed.
yeah. And during that time, I had two kids at home. We were trying to help them with online learning. My mother-in-law lived with us. My husband was also working from home. So thankfully, we were able to still have jobs, but it just, for me, and my stress level was
Oh, yeah.
through the roof, just like I'm sure so many Americans
Yep.
juggling so many
This
things.
sounds familiar. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a nightmare.
And I had been you know, practicing yoga since my 20s. I'm in my
Hmm.
40s now, so it's been another like long journey with yoga, but not very consistently. And I had started out in the
Yeah.
space of like hot yoga, and in my 20s that really was beneficial for me, but now in my 40s after two kids, it just isn't where
Yep.
I can land and be.
I know
So
I used to love power yoga in my
yes, that's what it is.
20s,
Hmm.
and I cannot do it anymore. My shoulder will not has this is like no thank you. If I
Yes.
try to go, then I'm out of commission for a week. But I can do hot yoga still. So it's
Okay.
interesting. Like everybody's body's kind of different.
Sure, yeah. Well, the power yoga that I go to is the hot yoga that I'm speaking of.
Oh, okay,
So it's the
yeah.
same thing in your realm. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I've injured myself unfortunately because I just
Hmm.
pushed past my link. So I was looking for a more aligned journey. So I actually signed up for a yoga teacher training here in outside of like in Pennsylvania. It was a studio connected with Create Karma, which
Okay.
is the organization. I don't think they're still moving forward or going forward, but it was wonderful teaching and teachers, and I did that online
This
and met
during
some
COVID.
during COVID.
Okay.
Yeah, like met some
Cool.
amazing people because I just needed something. Like I'm a really big extrovert, and it was really hard for me to be in my house
Mm,
with my family. And I have a wonderful group of neighbors and close friends, but it still was, we were in that space
yeah.
where like, should we even be around each other?
Yeah.
So I did that. And during that time, I was really inspired to take yoga and nutrition and put them together.
Ooh.
And right now, I currently also work as a dietitian for Downingtown Nutrition. And at the time, I was working part-time for them.
Okay.
And I started seeing clients one-on-one. And I noticed, and I'm sure you can attest to this, everyone was stressed out. And one of the biggest things was you couldn't do nutrition change without the stress management piece. Like
Yeah.
75% of the clients I see one-on-one for Downingtown Nutrition, they rank their stress at an 8 out of 10 level,
Shit. That's awful.
right?
Yeah.
And
Oh,
sometimes people say, "Oh, I'm a 5." But really, once I start talking to them,
you're like, no.
no, I was like, no, no, no. Like compared to another person that I've talked to, like you're at an 8.
Yeah.
So I just saw this opportunity to take this stress management tool, which was yoga, and that was just my own journey of like opening up into the space of stress management. That was just my own one thing.
Mhm.
But with yoga, it teaches you breathing techniques, it teaches you mindfulness, it teaches you meditation. Like there was this emphasis on treating yourself with love and care, just as like we treat our kids or other family members with love and care. And I realized that overeating and over drinking was not helping that. So I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of take that nutrition and meld it in with the yoga space. And I started actually the program first, I started, which was Journey to Joy under then Joyful Connection Nutrition Wellness. And Journey
Okay.
to Joy, I ran that program a couple times, and it was really intuitive eating and mindfulness as well as yoga and nutrition in a way that wasn't, I had a lot of, again, moms and women who are looking for a solution to maybe feel better about their bodies without chronic dieting. Like people can
Yeah.
go to Weight Watchers, they can go to like Jenny
Yep.
Craig, they can now we have GLP-1s, which is can be a tool, but this was more of an
What is
approach of,
GLP-1s?
oh, those are medications like Wegovy and
Oh,
Ozempic.
so I
Yeah,
think good laboratory practices.
exactly. No, yeah. GLP-1 medications
Yeah.
that are,
But the
yeah.
like those, I mean, that's a whole nother topic, but like to speak to what you're talking about, it's like it's not getting at the root of the issue, which is stress. So it's like if you don't treat the underlying thing, it's just going to kind of manifest in different ways, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And so I felt like I really needed to break down that barrier, which was like how to help, especially women, break this stress cycle
And you
and
have,
give
oh,
tools.
sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. Give
Right.
tools for every day and like also get to that. It's a more of a holistic approach of,
Hmm.
hey, let's look at mind, body, and spirit rather than just, hey, let's fix the problem, which might be like, oh, I gained 20 pounds during the pandemic.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, it's going to be a lot easy. The root is probably eating processed foods and overeating and alcohol, but like those are going to be hard to remove if you're still like not addressing the stress.
Yeah, if you don't have another way to cope or you don't
Yeah.
even recognize like the first change, the first thing or step to make any type of behavior change is awareness. And so
Yeah.
I think a lot of people didn't even weren't really aware of it at the time either. And then
Mhm.
when they were looking at themselves or trying to find a different solution than the alcohol or the food or scrolling on your phone or watching the news, providing another solution and another path is really what people really want.
Yeah, and it's all like different ways of numbing versus like feeling whatever it is. And it's interesting how you talked about how yoga teaches you just all of those things like breath work, meditation, self-care, and the physical movement, because I think like in our culture, most people don't realize that those other components are part of yoga. It's not just the physical practice. That's like one branch of yoga. And so sometimes you'll go to yoga class and they're just focused on the physical asana. And sometimes you go and they like incorporate these other things because those are the ancient practices, right? And they do kind of help you approach things more from like a integrated standpoint. Um, I there was something else you mentioned that I wanted to touch on. Oh yes, so your company, um, I'm assuming that it sprung up because you weren't able to offer your day job is kind of like traditional like insurance compensated nutrition, and then you these integrated practices or more holistic practices aren't covered by most insurances, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So we provide at Downingtown Nutrition like one-on-one medical nutrition therapy. So many
Hmm.
times people, obesity is a disease now, and then there's also diabetes or heart disease or cardiovascular disease or high cholesterol, high blood pressure. When someone comes in to see us at Downingtown Nutrition, those many times people get at least 6 visits covered, some
Hmm.
unlimited. So they can come see us and do the nutrition counseling piece, where I also try to incorporate some of these stress management pieces, especially if it's a barrier. But practicing yoga, providing day retreats, doing a whole
Mm.
program specific to women, also supporting people in a way that, there's more touch points, meaning, maybe we'd have a call or a group meeting or go away for a whole day together on the weekend. That's not necessarily covered by insurance in the same way. So it's mostly
Yeah.
out of pocket.
So we're talking about like community type of events where um, you're, because I feel like that connection with others is so powerful in healing and regulating our nervous system as well. So I love to hear that you're offering that and seeing the benefit of that because that's definitely been my personal experience as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's part of why I named the company Joyful Connection because back in 2021, I made an intention for the year, which was joy, because I felt like, coming out of 2020, there was a lack. There was like fear, there was isolation, there was angst. And
Mm.
in 2021, I really wanted to bring myself more joy and then other women as well. And then the connection piece, that's part of who I am as a person. And I love to get people connected with each other. And then also, I think it's really important to get connected with yourself. There's always this belief that you really can't truly love another until you have your own self-love. And I know, especially women really struggle with that. And they really struggle with that in relation to their body image, sometimes the diet culture for those of us that have been around long enough to see, the
Like,
weight loss diets, the low carb diets,
yep,
the
all of it.
all the
And I'm
things,
just like
right? And
remembering reading these magazines as a kid. Like we used to look at Cosmo and all these magazines with like, yeah, it was just so part of the culture. It's a little different now, but it's still part of the culture. It's just different ways that people are exposed.
yeah, absolutely. There's this ideal body weight or ideal figure that we all are supposed to have. And it's really, really hard to attain, especially when fast food and quick food and processed food is around us all the time. And
Hmm.
then also people don't necessarily have the tools to shop and or prepare healthy, fresh foods for themselves and their families. And it just becomes a hard, challenging cycle that perpetuates on itself. We're stressed. We go something to quick, simple, easy that might not be the healthiest. Then we eat it. and then we feel bad, and then we get more stressed. So,
Yes.
or we feel worse about our bodies. And so breaking that cycle in one part of it is part
Mm.
of what I've helped women to do.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'd love to go back to one thing you talked about, which was you mentioned intuitive eating. And I know that like your work focuses heavily on joy and intuition. So I'd love to talk more about like how you define joy and intuition in the context of nutrition and wellness and like more about your central philosophy.
Yeah. So some of the concepts, I also during that time, I think I read Brene Brown's Atlas of the
Mm,
Heart, and
it's
I
on
don't
my
even know
list.
exactly what her joy definition is, but it's different than happiness. Like
Yeah.
joy is this feeling that you're just almost elated around something and it brings you a different level of happiness. And it's really connected sometimes to your purpose too. And so to me, like food, we all have to eat it. Like you can't get rid of it. You can't just take it away out of your life. Like, and why not do something that we have to do every single day, become enjoyable and have joy? And I feel like we see other cultures do this much differently than we do, right? You go to Europe and you might spend 3 hours having dinner, not 5 minutes shoveling in your food before you go take your kids to a soccer game or
Guilty.
whatever afternoon, evening activities we have, right? You also like I have vacationed up in Canada all my life, and there's just a different level of like, even some of the quality of the food is, cherished and appreciated in a different way.
Hmm.
And those of us that might have grown up in a religious household, maybe we had more gratitude before we ate, or if that would have been in the form of prayer or grace. And I think a lot of that has changed for us. And so I wanted to bring some of those concepts back, especially from the yogic like perspective, where we do have gratitude and appreciation and the intuition that we've all been born as intuitive eaters. When if you've had babies, our listeners have had babies, when they're full, they turn away, they stop. They're not told like, oh, you got to finish this. You didn't take enough, right? They're done. And then as we have environmental cues and influences from our parents or caregivers, we've been told to turn those things off. That no, you have to have another bite. No, you have to finish your plate. Oh no, you can't have any more of that because that's bad or that's wrong. You need to eat more of this. So we have a lot of influences from the outside world to tell us what we should or shouldn't do around eating instead of listening to ourselves. And I find that a lot of people have turned off the hunger fullness cues that they generally have and override that with like, oh, I have to eat at 9 o'clock in the morning. That's my breakfast time. Oh, there's not going to be any more food. Maybe especially if they're food insecure or lived in a household where they had to finish everything until the next meal. So I have to finish even though I'm full and I'm satiated. So that's the intuitive eating part. There's actually two dietitians that created that framework. And you can find the book, you can find a lot of information out there. And so I take some of those concepts and apply them. But there's also this school of thought where a lot of my clients do still want to look better or feel better in their clothes. So I try to also incorporate more mindfulness, which means slowing down at least at one meal, meaning like, for example, that dinner time might not be the time to slow down because you are running out the door. But maybe it's breakfast when you have 10 extra minutes to enjoy your breakfast or your coffee. Maybe it's putting it on a nice, beautiful plate. So the presentation is alluring, and that's the joy piece, right? Like, ooh, like, isn't it nicer if your food looks good and on a nice plate than if it's out of the can with a fork, hardly even warmed up? So
Yeah.
that's where I help my clients realize that they deserve to
Yeah.
eat well, they deserve to serve themselves, and they deserve the time it takes to do that. And go ahead, what were you gonna say?
It reminds me of my friends have this we had started this I don't know, we kind of like an inside joke thing about sad lunch because her husband was like making fun of her for having sad lunch, and it was basically like kind of like a collection of like random things you find in the fridge. And then we found out it was like actually like a pop culture thing. I think they called it like white girl lunch or
Oh,
something.
really?
We were like, "Oh, I like sad lunch butter," but yeah, it was like, like a little bit of nuts and then like a little bit of leftover whatever, and it doesn't necessarily make a meal, but it was just like, yeah, you're just kind of grabbing what you can, and
Yeah,
yeah,
and I have a lot of clients that do that while they make lunch for their kids, right? Like these
yeah,
beautiful bento boxes with like star fruit that's cut out and,
yeah.
different shaped sandwiches and organic carrots. And I'm like, I try to help them to understand that they should also be doing that for themselves
Oh yeah, I
because
should.
they deserve it too. And
Yeah,
a lot of times, a lot of women don't feel like they're like, well, no, like I don't have the time. So I help them
yeah,
find it. Right. And that's the biggest
yeah.
piece. Like, where do we have time? Is it decreasing our stress so we don't doom scroll for that 15 minutes before we go to bed? Is
Mm,
it maybe asking for help? That's a big deal for a lot of people is saying like, I need help with the kids in the morning or with the laundry or I need a carpool or something like that. And then that time can open up for them to be able to fuel themselves in a different way. And this all stemmed also, I went to Kirpalu, which is in the Berkshires in Massachusetts,
yeah.
and it's a yoga retreat center. It's wonderful. And I've been a couple times with my
I've been
friends and my
eyeing it,
stepmom.
but I've never
And
been.
they have silent breakfast.
Ooh.
And I remember going the first time with my stepmom, Linda, and we were like, what is this concept? What do you mean silent breakfast? Everyone's like very quiet and we're trying to like, give each other sign language and tell each other. And then we realized like this was for ourselves. Like this, we are
Mm.
so overstimulated in our environments all the time that we could actually just sit and look at the colors of the food, look at the textures, slow down and take bites, actually chew our food instead of shoveling and
Wow.
enjoy the whole full 20 minutes to a half an hour of a beautiful silent breakfast.
We're gonna do that at our retreat. I want to do
Yes.
that. Do you want to guide silent
Oh, I
breakfast?
would love to.
That would be so amazing. I think we need it. Yeah, that just totally resonates. Yeah, I love that idea. I've
And
always,
sometimes we have uncomfortable like feelings that come up because we're so
yeah,
not used to it,
yeah.
especially those of us that are busy moms that have little kids running around all the time. The silence almost can feel uncomfortable if we haven't been in it in a while.
Yeah, and kind of circling back to what we were talking about earlier, it can be good to just sit with those uncomfortable feelings and kind of be forced in a way to sit with the feelings and then realize like it's okay. And you don't have to avoid them. You don't have to pick up your phone or whatever it is you do to numb out. You can just be uncomfortable and it will pass. And
Yes.
it's actually not that bad. But I have to, I mean, we all have to be reminded of that, right?
Yes.
Constantly. And when I think of intuitive eating, I've always been interested in it, but I've always been scared of the idea because I feel like I'll just eat ice cream and junk food. It's like, I always think of it as like, oh, I could just eat whatever I want. Well, I don't know that I trust myself to eat whatever I want. Is that a common, is it that you are intuitively eating till you're full, or are you also like listening to your body, like what it craves?
I think it's both. One of the concepts is, and this also overlaps with mindful eating. The Japanese, they eat until they're about 80% full.
Yes.
And
I heard about that in what is it, that Blue Zone movie?
yes, yes, the
I
Blue
or
Zone
the
movies, those are
series.
great.
So
Yeah.
good, yeah.
And it's the same kind of idea. There's a scale in intuitive eating where it's like
Mm,
0, your like tank is empty, you're like past the point of like starving, hungry, angry,
mm,
hangry. And then 10 is like overly stuffed where you're almost on
uncomfortable.
the verge of like vomiting, not feeling well. And we generally want people to stop somewhere but at like a 7 or a 6. And that's hard when people have been chronically dieting because their kind of hormones are out of balance when it comes
Mm,
to the hunger fullness signals in our bodies. So it is a hard thing to trust. But when I did some of the intuitive eating education, they talked about, think about donuts, right? People are like, oh, like if I could just eat all the donuts, it would be great. But imagine if that was true.
Yeah.
Imagine having donuts for like two donuts for breakfast, three donuts for lunch, four donuts for dinner.
Yeah.
Like
You'd
I'd be
get
done
over
after
it.
breakfast after the
Yeah.
second one. Most of us would.
Yeah.
So it's also really helpful, I think, for people that have struggled with disordered eating. It's a
Mm,
really good concept for people that, either are on the binge eating scale or have restricted, like in the anorexic space, or even just chronic dieting.
yeah.
It's just more liberating to feel that they could have some quote unquote control around it, but they do have to trust themselves. So part
Hmm.
of it is the psychological piece of it, where
Yeah,
um,
totally.
I've had a client where we've encouraged her. She's in recovery for binge eating, and we had to work up to that point where it's like, okay, you have to buy the triggering ice cream, which was her, trigger food, and be
Right.
able to
Stop.
trust yourself to say you can have as much as you want.
Yeah.
One of the mindfulness components that I often bring to a lot of my clients is whatever food it is that they tend to overeat, if it's chocolate cake, if it's Oreos, if
Yeah.
it's, ice cream. We actually go through a five senses, like the five senses,
Ooh.
slowly eating that food.
Hmm.
And we notice the look of it. We notice like the smell of it. We notice the sound of it, then the mouthfeel or the touch, and then
Oh.
last is the taste. And usually this experiment takes anywhere between like 10 to 15 minutes. And I had one client once where she was eating an Oreo and she got to the end of it and she's like, Becky, I don't even like this. Like it doesn't taste good. She's like, the
Wow.
chocolate outside, it's kind of like yucky and like crumbly, and the inside doesn't, it just tastes like pure sugar. She's like,
Yeah.
this isn't even quote unquote, in her mind, it wasn't even worth it. But she had never slowed down enough
Yeah.
to actually taste it and go through the
That's
experiment. So it was pretty liberating for her
Yeah,
in
I
that
can
moment.
see that with an Oreo, like, because normally you just kind of wolf them down. And so,
Yep.
like, but yeah, if you slow it down, it's like, ooh, this is waxy or tastes artificial. I could definitely see those things coming up.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so
And
cool. Thank you for
there's
sharing.
also this idea where we often restrict ourselves from things, meaning like we're not allowed to eat the carbs, right? Especially people that have been on restrictive diets, right?
Yep.
Like they've learned in from the other programs, like this is a bad food. And if you've ever had teenagers and you tell teenagers, can't do that, you can't have that, what
Yeah.
do you think happens?
Or if you tell me that as a grown woman,
Correct.
yeah, I'm
It's
like,
human
mm-mm.
nature.
Yeah,
I'm going to have it and I'm going to have more.
I know.
So we often have to allow ourselves and give our permission to have it. Now, granted, sh would eating Oreos every single day for the next, 30 days be quote unquote good for you? Maybe, maybe not, but would you feel good? And that's the other piece of it. It's like, how do you
Mhm.
feel after you eat this thing? Not just of what society has told you how you should feel, but like, do you feel satisfied and like
Yeah,
well-rounded in all the things that you're eating?
yeah, yeah. That's interesting. Because the first thing that came up for me is like, oh, I don't want to like deal with that. And it's
Yeah,
so funny. It's like, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, and I think that
yeah,
that's really common. Like, I don't really like want to. It's like a natural response to not want to like deal with these feelings. But even we learn that like through experience. I think that's like, oh, or if we can learn through experience again and again and again, that when we let these feelings come up, there it's not that bad, and then we can move through them, and then we can trust ourselves, right? So it's like a
yes,
process. But it's funny because it's like, oh, I've like dealt with this, I feel like, in a lot of aspects of my life, and it's like this again. I still
yeah.
haven't I still haven't okay, I guess this is gonna be the work of a lifetime, right?
Yeah, and I think it is for most of us. And I put my own self in that category too, you know?
Yeah,
It's like even though
absolutely.
I know that the Oreo doesn't always, satisfy me, I'm still gonna have it,
Yeah.
especially if it's like yesterday when I was at a competition for my son's, Lego robotics, and that was the only thing available until we ate dinner at 7 o'clock. It was part of the diet that day. It was part of what I ate, and that's okay.
Yeah, about 12, 14 years ago, I got diagnosed with eosinophilic esophagitis, which is like, for those who don't know, a high level of eosinophils, which are a type of immune cell in your upper um, GI tract, especially in your esophagus. And um, they put me on medications, which worked for like a year and a half, and then all my symptoms came back because it wasn't addressing the issue. And then that paper came out, and I was lucky because I had access to the scientific literature. Now a lot of things are open access, but at that time, a lot of articles were behind a paywall still. But I was in grad school, and the first paper came out showing that elimination diet in adults was successful 80 to 90% of the time.
Yes.
So I went off my medications, and I felt better like almost immediately, and all these things that I would have never thought were associated with it like kind of stopped happening.
Mm.
And then I didn't really appreciate how sick I was until I like started feeling better. But long story longer, the reason I bring it up is because um, at first it was like egg, dairy, and gluten that I was allergic to, and eventually pretty quickly I was able to reintroduce egg, maybe like a year or so. And then more recently, I got retested, and my EOE went away. And they said, "Well, you couldn't reintroduce these foods." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know." So I've been having dairy, and that's been okay, as long as I don't overdo it. But I'm really
Sure.
reluctant to introduce gluten, and part of it I think is I don't want to feel sick or start this whole cascade of things again. But the other thing is, I think I'm realizing that I don't want to introduce choices that like being gluten free. Like if you're at a snack bar for an event, it's like I just can't have Oreos. So it's like not even like I mean this has been 12 years, so it's not even
Right.
something like I like see anymore, or consider. So like just having an allergy or intolerance to gluten has taken like so many things off that are unhealthy off of the list that I'm like, ooh, I kind of like it
Yeah.
now. I don't know, but so
Yeah,
it's
and I think
interesting.
like you have a condition, right? And that's part of a lot of people's health journeys. And some people have those intolerances or those situations. And,
Yeah,
it's for your health that you have to make that choice.
yeah. And now I guess what I'm saying is now I don't really see it as, I see it almost as an advantage rather than a disadvantage like I used to. Because it's like, oh no, like I don't, most of the things that I say no to are things that like aren't necessarily like healthy options. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that it over the years it's kind of changed that way.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to eating, we all have choices, right? Like you have the choice to stay away from gluten if you want to continue to do that. You also know from experience that that choice, if you decide to have something, that could have a certain effect on you, and you might not want to choose to do that. So it really makes a difference. I think we oftentimes give those choices to others that we often don't think about it from an intuitive perspective. And also, if you're going to eat quote unquote gluten, maybe it's not an Oreo. Maybe the choice is to have some type of, sourdough, fresh baked bread
Yeah,
from your local bakery. And
yeah.
that might be a different choice.
Yeah. I think so. And my partner started making sourdough at home, so I'm like, okay, maybe that's where I start.
Yeah, that's where you start.
Seems like a
And,
nice place to
there's
start.
also this concept that maybe it's not necessarily gluten, maybe it's the wheat and all the pesticides, the
Yeah.
glyphosate that we spray on everything.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can find organic wheat flour that's, non-GMO, then that might be a better choice.
Hmm. Okay, I'll report back
Yeah, let me know.
when I'm ready. Okay, I'm looking at my list of questions that I wanted to get to, and I feel like some of these things we talked about already, which is great. Mm,
Well, let me tell you about, I think we wanted to talk about the women's circles and wellness
yeah, I
retreats.
wanted to know like how to talk about what it looks like when, if you could tell me more what it looks like when somebody attends your women's circles or attends your retreat, is it part of a bigger program they're going through with you, or can they go to these one off? And what would they expect? And really, what is the benefit of being in community versus working one on one?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll start with the women's circles because those are the ones I've been doing probably more than 2 years now. And in my local community, these are in person. So again, I'm outside of Philadelphia. So I'm in Downingtown, Pennsylvania. And I also do them at Optimal Massage and Movement, which is my friend's studio. And we do women's circles there. And that's in Westchester, Pennsylvania. And that typically looks like and we don't want to not we're not excluding men on purpose, but in general, from my experience, women tend to need this connection and an authentic connection with each other and a safe space to share.
Yeah.
And sometimes when there other sex is involved, it just brings it in a different dynamic. So I know that there's other places around here that do like men's retreats and men's, connective things, but I'm a woman and I feel most comfortable and confident in that space. So what women expect or what they might do while we're there, we usually have a theme. So
Okay.
like this time last year, we were talking about self-love.
Mm-hmm.
We've also done things like the love languages and how
Oh
to talk
yeah.
about those and communicate those.
Yep.
We've also done intention setting in the new year. So that would look like I help women go through, what they struggled with the past year, what they were proud of, and what they want the new year to look like. And if you've ever, again, been to a yoga class and in the beginning they might ask you to set an intention, I'm just helping people guide that for a bigger picture piece. Many times, there's New Year's resolutions that start and nobody finishes them. So this is
Yeah.
a different way of looking at it. Just like I said, in 2021, it was my year of joy. This year is actually my year to create. Last year was my year to play. The year before that was ease, and the year before that was love. And in 2020 was to let it go. So
I love it. Like, I've seen this happen more and more where I hear women in my circles choosing a word or a theme for the year rather than like a long list of goals. And I'm like, oh, that sounds refreshing.
it is. And you can kind of weave it into all places in your life rather than the typical, I want to work out every day for, the next 30 days, or I want to lose 20 pounds, or I'm not going to drink for, whatever amount of time. It's like, how do you create something? For me this year, it's like, how do I create more abundance in my life? Or how do I create fun in my household? So it just helps to guide them in that way.
You hang
In the
out with
women's
your
circles,
youngest. You hang out with your youngest son.
yeah, exactly. Hang
Is
out
the
with my
point
youngest
one?
son and have a lot of fun. Yeah. And the women's circles, like I said, have a different theme. Sometimes it's whatever's going on in the world. Like after the 2024 election in the fall, there was a lot of people in my community that felt like they needed a place to be heard and discuss their emotions after that. So we held space for that. And it was confidential, and we just held each other and were able to kind of go through that together. So it often does feel, I think, scary for sometimes for people, especially I don't know how your experience is with making friends or creating new connections in as we get older. It's harder to
It
do.
is really
And
hard.
so we come at it from a place of like, how can we support ourselves and how can we support each other without judgment and without that feeling that someone is going to stab you in the back. So it's never like that. And so those are the women's circles. And then the retreats, I've done a couple day retreats, and that comes from incorporating yoga into the day retreat. We usually start with breakfast because I love nutrition and I love to cook. So it's hot tea and good coffee and usually a nutrition a theme around the season. So I like to try to incorporate seasonal produce, and we have a really great local farm that we connect with and utilize. It might be morning yoga and then followed by a session. I've had it where we've done things like the mindful eating workshop or an inner child workshop or automatic writing workshops. So I generally connect with different facilitators to lead those.
Mm-hmm.
Then they have lunch, and that's the time where we connect. And one year I actually did. groups cooking together in my house when I did it,
Cool.
and they had to like formulate a plan before they cooked together. And it was me, making salad and grilling things, and then they didn't talk for 10 minutes, and so they had to use other forms of communication in order to
That's
get it done.
fun.
So I try to incorporate some of those like different learning techniques in it. And then in the afternoon, it would be again another yoga session. It could be walking meditation or some other form of connection or facilitation. Sometimes we incorporate crystals. The last one that Kim Wolf and I did in the fall was at a farm, and that was in a barn, and it was a beautiful day. And so we were able to walk outside. And then we did again another women's circle in the end. And we're releasing, because it was the fall time, releasing what didn't serve us anymore, and then creating something new. And my friend Jess had facilitated that one. So it's a day of self-care, but we guide you throughout the whole day with either the workshops or the yoga or the meditation.
Ooh, sign me up.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Okay. I think, yeah, I was thinking about like my first experience with the women's circle was actually pretty recently, and I really didn't know what to expect. So I think like when I've attended them, and now I've led some as well, for those who've never gone, I think you did like a wonderful job of explaining like kind of the objective and like the feel of it. Usually there's like a facilitator, right? That would be yourself or me. And then you sit in an actual circle so that
You
everybody
do.
like
Yes.
co-participates. And then um, generally there's like a topic, like you said, and then you'll go around in circle or sometimes kind of less methodically. Sometimes it's like everybody shares for a couple minutes in order, and then I've also seen it done where maybe you do a meditation or something, and then people just share as they feel the need to about like what came up during certain meditation or breath work or a journal prompt or something like that. It can be really scary going into like this setting when you've never been to one, or like it feels kind of vulnerable, I guess. But that's the beauty of it, I think, is that like when we are take that leap and are able to be vulnerable with others, that's when we can bridge new relationships and friendships. And then we also learn like about ourselves too. Yeah.
Yes. And I've seen myself as a part of those when I wasn't the facilitator and I was a part of them. They were really powerful because,
Mm.
one theme was like talking about sisterhood and like what that looks like for us, for example. That would be one of the themes. And thinking about for myself, like I don't have a biological sister, but all the sisters that I have that are my friends. And it was really wonderful to be able to share that with others, or the struggle of finding friendships in later in life if,
Yeah.
you're busy with life and connection. I had another client who often was more introverted and really spent a lot of time at home, and she worked from home. So coming to those women's circles, yes, was very vulnerable for her. But I feel like you can always pass too. Like you don't have to
Yes,
share. Like you can be
exactly.
a part of it and no one judges you or looks at you like you didn't say anything. It's okay just to feel the energy of acceptance and a place of similar interests in whatever that shows up for. And there's been times with women's circles where, to your point, where someone shares something and someone else is like, oh my gosh, I'm going through the same thing. Like we're kind of like I've seen people in the sandwich generation where they have older parents and then younger kids, and they're really struggling with the older parent piece of it, and they connect and are able to talk about that, or divorce, we're in that place too where, people are having a hard time. And so I feel like there's a new connection that can be formed either with yourself or with others in those women's circles, and you feel really supported.
Yeah, totally. I think like for myself, we've moved so much that it's hard. Like I've maintained friendships with people in different places, but then I need friendships locally,
Yes.
and I don't necessarily have that yet because like when you keep bouncing around, that's hard to do. You don't, you have to make new friendships. And So that's been a challenge. And what else was I, so there's something else I wanted to say. The women's circles haven't necessarily, oh, yes. And I was going to say, between the moving and divorces, my friends going through divorces, I feel, sometimes it changes the relationship of those
Sure.
friendships, and I am mourning the their. I'm very sensitive, so it's like really hard for me when my friends go through divorce, right? And
Yeah.
even if we stay friends, it's hard. And so between that and the moving, it has been a challenge. And while I haven't necessarily left the women's circles with new friends, and I have left with that feeling of like belonging, or that feeling of community. So it's not it's been interesting to kind of think about that. I think it definitely fills the cup, but in a different
Yes.
way. Yeah.
When you said that, I was just thinking that it's like I feel like we need to find things that fill our bucket or our cup more often than not.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, instead of going, say, to happy hour and dinner with a couple people that I might be acquainted with, going to a women's circle for me fills my bucket more because
Yeah.
to me it's more authentic. And
Yeah.
even if I don't walk out with a brand new friend, it feels like I've been heard. And I think a lot of times we don't always get that in our personal relationships or in our friendships. And it also is that community piece that we all crave. We're all human and we
Yeah.
all really need. And it's a place where we can do that together.
Yeah, exactly. You can like go really deep, whereas like a happy hour, you're gonna stay typically more at a superficial level. So yeah, oh, that's so fun. I love that we talked about that. Okay, well, I could talk to you all day.
Yes, I can too, to you.
But we're running up on time. So, is there anything that we haven't discussed about your business, or I don't know, anything you feel like we haven't
No,
uncovered
I think we
that you want
covered
to
it
share?
pretty well. Yeah, my Joyful Connection business is really focused on the wellness piece, the
Okay.
yoga, the meditation, those modalities, and they still incorporate into nutrition, but it's really helping people feel better about themselves.
Wonderful. Well, we'll put a link to that in the show notes,
Thank
as well
you.
as our upcoming joint retreat in
Yes.
Australia. Do you have any other events or programs coming up that you want listeners to be aware of?
I may be doing we haven't decided on the date yet, but here outside of Philadelphia in the spring, probably another day retreat. So you either find that on my website or I usually connect with Optimal Massage and Movement, and she
Mm-hmm.
usually puts the event there. And that's where I've been doing the women's circles too. So they can find that for the women's circles.
And where's the best place to find you? Is it on your website or through
Probably
email?
either Instagram or Facebook. I'm
Okay. And
still in that realm.
what's your name on there?
It's for Facebook, I believe it's both Joyful Connection, Nutrition and Wellness for both.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time today, Becky. Thank you so much.
Yes.
The
Thank you, Ciara.
first of, feel like many conversations to come.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
And I think that's it.